I'm a holistic kink practitioner, and I'm a conscious third for couples. And I also bring vocal work into what I do in my Dom life. So I am a professional Dom as well. And I specialize in having people release their voices when in a session, when in the sub role, welcoming their expression, welcoming their voice through impact play, through different types of restraint, and having that be part of the medicine of it. So in short, brief synopsis, that is in part what I do.
For anyone listening who's like, what is holistic kink? How would you describe that to them?
Right. Yeah. So I see it as kink practices with the intention of really addressing the whole person, the whole their body, their mind, their spirit. So not just relegating it to sexuality, but to erotic flow, and knowing that eros is not only related to our sexuality. It's just life force in general. It's how we interact with the world. It's that je ne sais quoi, that thing that doesn't quite have a name, but having space for really the whole person and for their spirituality in particular to be part of a kink experience. And for me to bridge that world and to have a relationship with God. I use the term God very openly and lovingly. I don't think of God as like some white dude in the clouds. To me, God is a very queer, inclusive, loving force of universal love. And so having the opportunity to relate to God as a Dom, and to have being in the position of a sub, for me in holistic kink, is like saying, okay, I trust the person who's playing the Dom role right now to channel Holy Spirit, to channel God, and to let that come through them so that I can be in practice of surrendering to God in my own life. So again, there's many layers to it. There's many facets to it. I don't come from a religious background per se, but I was steeped and raised in gospel music. So that's part of my artistic lineage that I've studied deeply. So I know that's a bunch of different directions, but namely for me, holistic kink is kind of like not just thinking of something in terms of Eastern and Western medicine, right? But it's like, how do we look at the whole picture? How do we look at someone's heart? How do we bring someone's emotions? How do we bring like everything that this person is navigating, even in their relationship with faith, to the table, and utilize kink practices to be in support of that?
And how would you define kink? Like,
Yeah.
who's
Great.
kinky and who's
Who's
not?
kinky? Who's not? Exactly. It's a great question. I did have a dear friend and teacher back in the day when I was starting to get into the kink. I remember their definition, and this is not a direct quote, but it was something along the lines of, sexual practices or desires that are considered taboo, that are considered shameful, and that really ultimately that society at large does not have a understanding around, that there's misunderstanding, there's misconception, there's taboo around, really for me, the healing power of leaning into those places. And so things that are deemed unacceptable, things that are relegated to the shadows, that's to me been one of the more resonant definitions of kink that I have found. And also I love who's to say what queer means. I feel very strongly about that as well. Part of the beauty to me of the word queer is that it's undefinable, that it doesn't mean like, oh, I was born with female parts and I like people with female parts, so that means that I'm queer. No, queer means so many different things. Kink can mean so many different things. And it's really, I found the power in it is for one to have their own personal definition that can be flexible and that can change. But leaning into the thing that goes, ooh, do I like that? Do I really like that? Do I have a thing for that, even though I like push it away? And that's where I love to lean in as myself, as an individual, as an erotic being in my own personal life, and as a practitioner.
I love how you mentioned the healing power that has come from leaning into these practices or desires that are not understood, or you use the word taboo.
Yes. Yes.
How is it that you've found that leaning into taboo, which I'm like, okay, so if kink is anything that's considered taboo, I'm like, okay, so just sex in general is kinky. Like,
Pretty much.
sex is like taboo, and yeah, sexuality as a whole. But How have you found that leaning into these areas that aren't very known or are considered taboo or maybe common, um, how has that been healing? And how have you seen it healing for people you've worked with or even
Yeah.
yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that question. I'll speak for myself firstly, just my own personal life, as that provided the foundation and context for what I've leaned into professionally. In that, when I had my first experience as a sub, having, all right, we're going to do a scene. There's a person playing the role of the Dom. I'm going to be flogged. I'm going to just be in this surrendered state. That handing someone else the control energetically, saying, trusting someone enough, trusting someone that I didn't know that well, but had an intuition that they were safe to say, hey, like, I'm offering my body, I'm offering my vulnerability here. Like, it can be a little bit scary. Like, I hope you can meet me there. And for that person to do so, for them to what felt like just wrap me up in their presence and in their care and with their attention, and to tend to my body in a way that was so loving and not romantic. I think that was really healing to have my first experience be with someone who was not a partner. There wasn't that confusing attachment dynamic of, are they here for me? Are they not? That can often come up in romantic relationships. But without that present, I found myself able to let go even more. And I found myself crying. I found myself sobbing when the flogger would hit the back of my heart, and just, bringing in body work, bringing in energy work, anything that may be stagnant in the back of the heart chakra, for instance, when it is struck repeatedly, when it is hit repeatedly with someone who is holding the presence of, I've got this, I've got you, I'm attuned, I'll listen. If you need to say stop, say stop. Helped me let go so much. Just that the basic impact of that spot in my body being hit again and again, someone attending to it, allowed for what felt like years of buildup, for years of constriction, years of calcification in my energy body to let go. That was incredibly healing. The acts can be very simple. It doesn't have to be a huge, crazy scene with like this tool and that tool and a paddle and whatever. Like, it can be one thing, and it can even be a look from a Dom, someone saying, I've got it. I've got you from here. You can let it go now. That, having an embodied experience of that for me enables me to create a template that I can apply in other areas of my life. So, having experienced it in my own body many times, going back for more curious, what other layer can I uncover, is really what inspired me to be in the position of the Dom, to have my own practice where I bring in different modalities, such as vocal work that I mentioned earlier, to say, hey, you can let it out here. I've got you here. You feel free to make any sound, be a ugly cry, ugly roar. It's all welcome here. I mean, how many spaces do we have to say? That's not very common. I haven't found it to be common. I haven't found that to be widely socially acceptable. But to create a container and a space where it is, I've seen huge transformation in my clients. People who, I didn't know that was in there. I didn't know I could sound like that. I didn't know I could sing like that. Upon spanking someone with all my might in a session, because I saw in their right hip there was some congested energy. So to bring in just like a huge sensory input, was able to unlock the sound that had been in there, trapped in their hip, essentially. Never heard them sing like that. So yes, the confluence of these different things I've seen to be healing, and for people to come back continue and let's say, I didn't know that I needed that. I didn't know how much I needed to be heard on that level, or to have this release. Um, I see it time and again, and I'm really grateful for it. It's never ending. It's endlessly fascinating to me. No two people are the same. Everyone comes with unique history, with unique trauma, with unique joys, with unique desires and curiosities. And I I cherish being in those spaces with people.
It's interesting because when you gave those examples just now, I was like, oh, okay, that is holistic kink. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that was a very clear example of that's what it looks like, meaning,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's purpose in what's being done. And it's not like maybe people who aren't this is really interesting because using Live Jasmine as the example, everyone thinks, okay, it's a cam site, so it's just porn. And
Mhm.
that is the stigma and that is the judgment.
Right.
And the thing is though, it's like, but the people that are actually in the space
Mhm.
realize that it's not that at all, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are on these sites for interaction and connection.
Totally.
Otherwise, they'd be on a porn site that's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's crazy because I interviewed this member. I always think about him when I'm talking about a lot of these connections, but he has been seeing the same model for 18 years.
Mm.
And he's
Yeah.
engaged. He's probably married now, but he was engaged when we had the interview, and he just will check in on her now weekly. But an 18-year friendship.
That's
And
so beautiful.
that's very common on Jasmine to have these very long relationships with one or two particular models. And
Mm.
behind the scenes, we see how life-changing that can be, how healing it can be, and has been for both. And
Oh.
you just described, is something that probably people who are more in the kink community. I'm curious though what your thoughts are. Let's say there are people who are not into holistic or conscious kink, and it's are they just like, okay, like more about pain or whatever? Because it sounds like there's a purpose to the pain in what you described.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that. And I think that's why, I have ads on different escort sites and do a lot of online work as well with people. So I'm in these realms and I very intentionally speak to the conscious element. And I think that more people want it than they realize. I think that more people who go to dungeons and go to maybe, I would say, and I'm trying to not have this sound like a judgment, but more like surface level kink. Nothing wrong with that. And I see in those spaces that there is a hunger for the intimacy that you were referencing earlier with that 18-year relationship. And to me, that's something that people on sites like Live Jasmine and other places can provide. And that's really a more appropriate place than in a romantic context. That often people aren't finding that level of intimacy that they have with a live-in partner or who they see every day. And that's okay, that sometimes that person is not meant for that role. And that doesn't mean they're cheating and that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that there's something that this other person understands about them as a human being that is so foundational to them feeling seen, feeling known, feeling valued. And that exactly as you said, like those relationships, those 18 years relationships with, clients and, models or whoever, they mean so much. And the ripple out effect of that is what I really believe in, is that if that person has that someone to hold that role in their life, think of how much more free they get to be. If they're not seeking that, if it's not coming out sideways and unconsciously, like, oh, I need to go get this over here, when that can be a pillar in their life, I feel that people are maybe more aligned with the people that are present in the body and maybe more aligned with their dharma and their path. But yeah, and coming back to your question in terms of, unconscious kink, as it were, even though I don't really think that's a thing. Um, yeah, it's a wild world. There's some stuff that's like that can be really mind-boggling for folks. And I am always curious at the deeper desire and the human level, like what is really going on underneath. That's really my approach. That's my style. And I think that's why people gravitate to my work. I have a very different ad up on different sites, than most of the other people that I see. And the people that come is like, they want that. They want someone to really see the part of them that they have shame around, because that's where liberation happens. That's where healing happens. And when that happens, we're kinder to people. There's a lot less bullshit, essentially.
That's interesting how you said that. So you said people want to be seen in the places they have shame.
Oh, yeah. To me, that's just such a driving desire, whether they know it or not.
Or
Like, of
because
course,
most of
I'm
them
gonna hide it.
don't
I do the same
actually.
shit. I do the same shit. Like a therapist called me out the other day. She was like, "You wouldn't even know what to do if someone like really saw in. You'd be mortified." I'm like, "Oh, totally." But I love that. Like to me, that's kinky. Is like I'm very much a Scorpio. People who know me know that like astrologically speaking, that's very much in my essence and in my makeup. I'm like hella Scorpio. I'm like, take me to the depths, take me all the way there, sex, death, all the time. Let's go. But yeah, where that shame, the places that we've deemed in ourselves unacceptable, unlovable, like to the degree that's like, oh, that hurts, like to the place it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I even think that about myself. If someone can say, hey, I know that place, I've been there too, I know what that's like, or like, I can sit with you here, I can sit with you in that discomfort, that's where the healing is.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's interesting because I interviewed a trauma specialist. She's a true expert as far as like researcher and psychologist, and she she's been doing it for I think 30 or 40 years. And she told me, a lot of members on Live Jasmine most likely have trauma around being seen and heard.
Yeah.
And so when you come into this environment where seriously, the dynamic is you have to explicitly say what you're wanting and looking for. And then someone basically their job is to create an environment of that for you. She said that a lot of people, when that happens, feel so seen and so heard that it starts touching on this old trauma
Oh
that's
yeah.
rewiring.
Yeah, I see it all the time. I see it in my clients all the time. And I'm of the belief that it may not even be in this lifetime, that it could be in a past lifetime, that it could be something collective even. That's, to me, that's part of the magic of conscious kink, is we can transmute collective energies through our bodies, and it doesn't all have to be personal. Sometimes it is deeply personal. Sometimes it is something from childhood that has been waiting for a witness, has been waiting to be seen and touched on. And sometimes it's like, no, there's this collective grief right now around climate change. For example, I have seen kink scenes around climate change and the devastation of that. How can we use our bodies as instruments and tools to transmute that and like let it evolve some? I lost my train of thought on that. I got excited about about collective kink possibilities, but yeah, to have that. And that's something that I really believe in. I've taught vocal work at a number of different kink gatherings, all over the country. And I've seen people just get wide-eyed around the fusion of vocal work and kink work, because to really state and speak out loud your desires, to state and speak out loud your boundaries, is a very different thing than hinting at them, than guessing at them, than journaling about them, than making someone else guess. And it takes practice. It's like playing an instrument. To say out loud, like with full confidence, I want you to spank me really hard on my left ass cheek. To say that without going into like, I want you to spank me hard on my, like that is called vocal fry, and something that I often see, especially in people conditioned and socialized as women, because it's a retraction. It's an unpresencing. It's a like, let me protect myself because what I'm about to say is really vulnerable. So to be in the practice of like, no, I want you to squeeze my right nipple so hard you almost rip it off. Like, just even saying something like that out loud can be so empowering, to let your voice be the conduit of like what you actually want on the inside. And that's why I feel so passionate about having voice and kink be related, because especially having more people conditioned and socialized as women feeling into their vocal power, and that ripple out is massive.
Out of curiosity, so what exactly is vocal work? How would you describe what it is that you do? Yeah.
Great. I would say it's also vocal play, and it's also vocal exploration. I I have an approach to it that I've just developed over the years myself. I was raised in doing musical theater. I had a lot of official vocal training in terms of singing. And while singing is definitely a part of my practice, I don't relegate it solely to that. It's namely expression and opening up the throat chakra. So for me, it boils down to cultivating a relationship with your voice. Vocal work is saying, okay, I'm in a lifelong relationship with myself, with this instrument that I've been given, my body. And the thing that helps me communicate and be in relation almost the most is my voice. So working with that intentionally, having time set aside, having daily practices where you tend that relationship, I found to be supportive for people's relationship with their partner, with their work, with their family. There's, it touches on every part of life because it's a big part of how we know each other. You can tell if someone has something going on by the tone of their voice. You can pick up phone, call your best friend, they can say one word, you can say, what's wrong? Right?
Mhm.
Voice expresses so much subtle energy. So to be tapped into that, to have a working, alive relationship with it, you can know where you're at. You can know where your clients are at. You can know where your lover is at. So yeah, it's really to say it's work is part of the equation. It's also play. It's also just getting to know. It's also having intimacy with one's voice.
I like that because it's almost a way to explore yourself and play and grow and like
For
now I can't
sure.
help but like listen to every little thing in my voice right now. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, you also mentioned that you are a conscious third. Is that
Yes.
for couples?
Yes.
Talk to me about what
Say
that
more
looks.
on that. Great. In other words, I'm a professional unicorn. That is to say, I love working with couples and coming in as a third party to support their erotic expression. So that doesn't always mean a full out threesome. Sometimes it does if that's what I choose. But ultimately, it's that, okay, I hold a non binary role. I hold a non binary body and I work with couples of all orientations, both cocks, both vulvas, and whatever the mix wants to be. But I've especially found that for couples where there is a vulva owner and there is a cock owner, having someone non-binary who's not holding a pole, I'm not holding a masculine or a feminine pole, that can create the space for something like really a sacred third to emerge for whatever sacred third represents their relationship, like a Venn diagram, the Vesica Pisces, the part in the middle. That is what I'm there in support of them in the name of. And I found a lot of people, especially people with vulvas who have mainly been in heterosexual relationships, are curious about being with another vulva. What is it like? I've never gone down on a vulva before. I've never had breasts in my mouth, and that it can be scary to admit that or to share that with a partner if they're in a heterosexual relationship or in a relationship with a cock-bodied person, because that can feel threatening or that can come with a lot of baggage. So to have someone who has experience, I have a lot of experience in being in trios that can be there for intention setting, that can be there for, okay, what are your desires and fears around this? For the person who is the cock owner, what does this bring up for you? Do you feel threatened by me? Are you curious about getting pegged? Are you wanting to know what it's like to have a more masculine presence in the space? So, these are all questions and they're so unique to each couple. But to facilitate and be in a space of like, all right, I'm a safe space for you to share any and everything about your sexuality and about y'all's relation that may not be available just the two of you, right? Because you may not feel safe enough, or you may be like, ooh, this is too edgy. But with a third party there's more permission. There's more of a space of like total celebration. And then, yeah, seeing what emerges from there and having aftercare. So this is what I found, stepping more into this role as a professional is that I keep my bottoms on the entire time, but stepping into the role as a professional there can be a lot of emotional integration that's necessary after an experience like that, especially if a couple has not opened up yet, if they've never explored polyamory but they want to. Having someone who is experienced who can say, hey, it makes sense that this is coming up for you. It makes sense that you feel a little nervous or like don't know what this means. Let's have an after call. Let's have an aftercare call. Let's have an integration call and see, how I can support you moving forward to feel more intimate with yourself and in your partnership, and maybe explore other people who want to come in. So that is in short what I do with couples, and I love it. It's different every time.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's basically almost allowing the couple to also explore,
Yeah.
instead of individual,
Yeah.
it's the couple exploring and adding some variety in. Again, when I've interviewed models who have worked with couples, this is something that they feel like they also do, which is like almost like this, they're facilitating this energy that the couple wouldn't have otherwise, and like
Yes.
couple to
Yes.
play and
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. I found it really powerful and to have a witness, even if I'm not touching them at all, One of my favorite sessions with a couple, I was sitting far back, but I was giving them guidance. I was like, now touch her here, because in my intuition, I sensed that that's something in her body was needing that, right? And when her partner did, she's totally opened up. So especially for couples who have been in partnership for a long time, you can get into ruts, you can get into autopilot, right? It makes sense. Like, oh, this is what we always do, blah, blah, blah. But to have someone witness, a neutral party, come in and say, hey, I noticed you check out right there. What was going through your mind? What was happening? Like, are you able to connect with them one more time? Can you have eye contact? Can really deepen and bring the partnership into a new level of intimacy that may not have been there or may not felt available otherwise because of that autopilot. Oh, we've been together for so long, blah, 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 kind of chit chat.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm curious, with all of your experience dealing directly with people in the field of human sexuality, what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about sex and human sexuality that you know for a fact just are not the case?
Okay, that if you like anything up your butt, that means you're gay. Let's just clear that people, oh my gosh, I see so many, especially people conditioned and socialized as men who are born with penises, think that if they like anything up their butt, that means they're queer. That means they're gay. And it's like, no, that means you like something like stimulating your prostate. That's all that means. If you want to make the meaning that that means you're gay, that's up to you. That's your choice. But I think the labeling is something that really can cause a lot of inner turmoil when it just comes down to you like what you like.
Are there any others that come to mind?
Let me sit with that for a moment. Any other misconceptions just about sexuality?
Or something that surprised you that you didn't know before, like in your time of seeing people?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this one feels vulnerable on my end to share. But that I had a lot of judgment of working with older white men and thinking, having my own kind of anarchist queer perspective, like, oh, they're the problem, like they're the ones who fucked it all up, like y'all are the ones that needed to, like I had a lot of attitude around that. And this work has been really healing, I think, of that part of me, because that was me not seeing them as a whole person. That was me being judgmental in ways that I judge other people for. So, that's the pot calling the kettle black is like, wow, KJ, you're being judgmental of this person. You have no idea what their life is like, right? Yes, they have privilege that you don't. Yes, they may have had an easier road in some ways because they are white, because they are cisgendered, but, white cisgendered male. But to see the human beneath that, I feel like that has been such a learning moment for me, and has been something that, what I'd say that the misconception or the thing that surprised me the most is the humanity when older white men can be in a submissive role, the tenderness that is there, the tenderness that I see in my clients when they let go of that alpha male, toxic masculinity thing that they've probably just been told is how to be a man their entire life. There's so much sadness underneath that. There's so much grief of having to uphold that, and I'm not saying that that makes an excuse for poor behavior, but it does make for a sad dude often. And so to be in the position, despite of my own judgment, to put that aside and say, that's not serving me. That's not serving this person. That's not me being through the eyes of God with this person, to set that aside and say, okay, you're hurting. You are someone who is hurting on the inside. You need someone to see you. You need someone to see you and not just say, oh, you're the problem. To see the humility and the vulnerability of these men when they are in that receivership, when they do have the flogger on them, I think that's been just personally very meaningful and surprising for me. You're like, wow, look at me having all these judgments, what I think that this person is like, and then the most respectful, kindest, sweetest men emerge from that. The way I see them soften, the way their eyes well up with tears. I'm like, oh, that's the learning. we all just want to feel home. We all just have wanted someone hold our hand and say, I know it's hard right now. Like, I've got you. Everybody wants that.
100%. 100%. But not everybody realizes how much they want that.
Totally. And yeah, that's why I honor the courage, especially of like the older white men who come to me as my clients, is that I think they're told that they should want it, or that they don't deserve it, right? There's a lot of rhetoric, that, you don't have, you have privilege, you don't deserve that kind of care, right? There's kind of that rebellious anarchist energy that, is there for good reason. Yeah, there's been a lot of like really shitty patriarchal stuff that has happened at the hand of white men. And if we want to heal that, if we really want to get into the healing of that, this is where the work gets really political. It's like, address that shame, address that place, address those men where they are so embarrassed to admit that they want to get fisted, that and when they finally have the courage to say it, like, what ripple effect may that have? It may be small, it may be so tiny, but if someone can admit that, then they can maybe be a little kinder. And when they have that need met, they can be a little softer at their work environment and be a little less of an asshole, right? So it's just like, it's slow. It's a slow build. It's a slow grow. But yeah, I just come back to everyone deserves that kind of care and that kind of space. And it does turn systemic. It does turn political. It does turn collective. The more we look in it, the more we zoom in, the more we zoom out, right? The macro and the micro of it. And that's why I really believe in this field and working with sexuality in particular, because when we shine a light on those places, that's when we're going to see the most freedom. Trust the inklings of where your spirit feels drawn to explore, even in places that are taboo, even in places that are vanilla. Not everyone is like, I'm super kinky. So what? Some people really genuinely aren't, and that's okay. Like, to embrace whatever it is. If you like vanilla sex, great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like I think everybody's gay and everybody's kinky. Sometimes I get on my soapbox and I will say shit like that, but really it's just like, trust what you like and get curious about it. Like, to know yourself on that level is such a gift. It's like, you're here for a limited time only. You may as well get to know it as deeply as you can, right? And there's such holiness in that. There's such power in knowing that and letting that be a continual discovery. It's not like, okay, well, now I know this about myself, I'm going to be this way the rest of my life. Not necessarily. Your tastes may change. They very well will, if you're attuned with them and you're letting yourself grow and evolve. But yeah, I just say permission, full permission to like what you like, to ask for what you want, to get edgy with it, to get really vulnerable with it, that you may as well.
What do you think that people, I love that, by the way, seriously. What do you think that people get wrong about sex work?
Oh God, thank you so much for asking this. I'm so grateful for you asking this. Yeah. That it's just inherently dangerous and that people do it for the wrong reasons. I had a lot of judgment around it before I started it officially and, began my own like in-person practice. I feel that people have a conception that it is largely unsafe and that it should be kept illegal, and that's not okay, and that's prostitution and blah, 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 the Bible. And it's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is some of the most holy underground political work that can possibly be happening. Like, I admire and look up so much to sex workers and people who put themselves and their body on the line intentionally. I'm also very aware that some people choose it and some people don't. So I want to acknowledge that privilege and that differentiation that a lot of people, especially in poorer countries, and, even here in America, step into sex work because of the necessity of it, because they need to feed their fucking kids, right? That is a reality. That is a harsh reality. So I acknowledge that is one sector of the work. And And I also acknowledge another sector where people choose and they step in, they say, okay, thank God I'm in a place in my life where I feel that this is a choice of mine, that I love this, that I want to come in and support people in this way. When I stepped into doing this work, I had a lot of friends who were concerned for my safety. They were like, do this, do this, do this, which, it's understandable. I had that too, but I think there's just such collective misunderstanding that you're going to get murdered, you're going to get killed, all this stuff, which, we see on the media all the time. We see, oh, so-and-so is like thrown in a dumpster. Again, I know these are extreme examples, but from what I have seen, the clients that I've worked with, and I do a very thorough screening process, I'm very blessed in this regard, in that they are some of the most respectful and kind people I have ever met. I assumed that people who would want sex work or would want this kind of relationship in their life would just be like horny old guys who, blah, blah, blah. These are some of the most integral people. They want intimacy. They want care. And again, they're not all like this. I screen people who, I don't feel that there's an alignment. I'm like, great, you'd be better served by somebody else. Like that doesn't align with my practice and what I have to offer from my heart. But, especially when it comes to the safety element, using my intuition has been really important. And again, I acknowledge that this is a gift. I acknowledge that I do have choice in this. If I get shifty eyes from somebody in an interview, and they can't hold my eye contact and they don't know what they're speaking about, then that's a no. And I'm like, okay, I'm not, I don't feel safe. My body doesn't feel safe stepping into this kind of professional dynamic with you. But when I do get a hit of like, oh, this person is just shy. Oh, bless their heart. They just want to experience something they never had before. They've never had the courage or the space to ask for this. There's a lot of misconceptions around the safety of the work. And the more sex workers that I have gotten to know and talk to and have been very dear and close friends of mine, they're just like, I feel very respected by my clients. Like, they know the deal. They know not to pull any shit. And I don't even worry that they're going to. And also, I've been very heartened by what I've seen as a prolific underground network of support amongst sex workers, that people check in when you have a session. People are like, yep, call me as soon as you're done, text me as soon as you're done, where's your location, where are you going to be? There's just this understanding. There is a siblinghood of like, we've got each other's back. And different apps where you can like write reviews of your clients, and it's just like, oh my God, this is the oldest profession in the world. This is the oldest fucking profession in the world. And there's different iterations of it, and there's different ways and modalities that it expresses itself. But ultimately, it's like we are mixing two of the most powerful energies that we have, sex and money, right? If we can do that with integrity, if we can do that and have each other's backs, and if we can do that and release some of the collective shame and misunderstanding around it, oh my God, so much is possible.
Yeah, that's really well said. I actually, even just when I interview models and some of the industry events that are in like the camming world, sometimes there are studios that may be competitive with each other, but if there's an event that is truly supporting the industry, they'll do anything to come together. And
yeah,
and models too, who are on the same site, maybe share a member or two. And no, I mean, they will support each other. Or some of the girls I've seen on, become like sisters. They're so close.
Yeah.
And that's something I've noticed, is this camaraderie,
Yes.
Yeah, there's like a camaraderie and a sticking together, which I think is really powerful. Is there anything about human connection, human sexuality, your work that we didn't talk about, but you want to share?
Thank you. Let me sit with that for a moment. I feel like something that I would really love to encourage folks, especially with any kind of practice working with sexuality, is a lot more, I'll say, well-versedness in gender and in knowing the difference between cis and trans, knowing what assigned female at birth means, knowing what assigned male at birth means, and having inclusivity around that language, I have found to be just really supportive. And again, it's not everybody's thing, but I feel the more people that can have that vernacular in their backpack and to have study, even if they identify as cis and they don't ever plan to explore that themselves, to have a space in their awareness and in their heart for the trans community, and for people who identify as non-binary, for people who choose a different orientation around their gender. It really means a lot. It means a lot to me as a non-binary person. It means a lot to me, for my trans siblings, and I encourage it, because when you start to question, or when you start to look at like how much of our world is based off of this polarity of male and female, right? How, like, just how deep it goes, divine masculine, divine feminine, all of that. That's great, whatever. But like when you can question that a little, when that begins to shake a little bit, I'm like, there's where systemic change can really happen. And so to have curiosity is like, oh, where's my divine feminine? That's what I refer to it as. Like, even if someone is cis and like totally fine with that, plans like still explore it, explore your cisness. Don't just assume that it's there. Like, get curious about why you choose to be cis and why that resonates for you. It doesn't mean you have to change it, but it's just like, can I embrace the divine feminine as well as the divine female masculine? What does that mean? What does that look like? Can that be informed in the people that I work with? Can I be more aware of not just assuming that someone goes by she and her because they have tits? That, again, is something that the ripple out of that is really powerful. And just the rate of suicide among trans, especially young trans, young adults, is just staggering. It is staggering. It is humbling. And so I really feel that the more we can do to have inclusive language and to have inclusivity in all realms of our work, no matter what our work is, we create a space at the table and create a space that says, hey, you matter, you're important here. If you're willing in your own body to challenge this systemic, like, male, female, like, this is what things are, if you have been given the assignment, in my perspective, from God, to challenge that through your own vessel, that's fucking brave. I commend you for that. I honor you for that. And I'll meet you there. I'll do my part as much as I can. I'll learn the terms. I will say they, them, even if I have resistance or don't understand. It's not about me. It's about you. That is what I would say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate it. I haven't gotten to speak all of that quite in that way yet. So that was refreshing.
Yeah, you have a great voice. Seriously.
Thank you. Thank you.